Hey, welcome back to another video. I really appreciate you clicking on it. I have been so busy, which is why I'm lacking on the content. I know I'm falling down. Big surges of orders here, and we're preparing for Father's Day, which is always big time of the year. And I've got Dad up here as much as he can lend a hand and putting in all the hours that I can. It's just growing pains. All good problems. It's like I learned a while ago, several years ago, while I was listening to like a personal development type person or a businessman or I can't remember who it was now, who said you don't want, no, it was Tony Robbins. You don't want no problems. What you want are better quality problems, or problems that that match with a better point in your life, that show growth. No problems means you're dead. I remember listening to that now. I actually really like Tony Robbins. I listened to him a lot back years ago when I was in university and learned a lot from him. Although he's painted as kind of like a self-help guru type person, he's really a really wise person, has a lot to say and a lot to offer on personal development. So man, there's so many good people out there. Anyways, I'm getting off track. Today here in the shop we're working on a Buck 110, and I know you guys always like the Buck 110 modifications, so that's what we're going to go through. Look at that, nice clean Buck 110, standard lock back, functioning well. Nice. Let's tear this thing apart and make it look a little bit prettier. Now let's talk briefly, just so you have an idea of how these are held together. So every one of these rivets aren't just decorative. They actually protrude right through the brass tang or frame here. They're mushroomed out on the inside. They're also peened out, they're peen heads here. And then this is your lock bar pin. So this is what your lock bar pivots on there. And that protrudes all the way through, and you have those pin heads too. So we need to take the heads off of all of these. Now you could drill these out. It's difficult to save the scales, I'll say that. It's near impossible. So I just go ahead, I don't even try, and I just use a belt grinder to take the heads off of all these rivets. You can keep the head on one side of this pin because you're going to push it out through. Okay, here we go. I'll run at a low speed. I like using old X-Acto blades because you need something with an edge that'll get in between those scales. And you can see just with that, I've started to tap. Now I've got a little punch here that I've ground into like a chisel bevel. You can see very simply there we've started to separate the scale, and you can see the pins in between there. So let's just continue. Don't drive too hard because you don't want to drive your frame inwards. Now I'm pulling that pin all the way through. And your lock bar can come out, and your lock bar spring is sitting in there as well. Be careful you don't lose that little one. Now as for these little brass pins, you can see them protruding. These are so long that you actually can't push them in. Remember, they're mushroomed out on the inside, so you can't pull them out through. They've got to go back in through, but they're too long. So you've got to clip all these off short so you can knock them inside. They're brass, so they're soft. This is not too difficult. Just be careful of your eyes. Now we have to partially reassemble this knife if we're going to file the lock bars. So we're going to sit that spring back in the notch. It's kind of got to fall in there. You might need an extra set of hands for this, but we sit this lock bar in place. And now see, I can push this down with two hands enough, because if it's going to teeter on the spring, you need to hold down both ends, then we got to get that pin back through there. Now this next part is completely up to you, so you don't have to pay much attention here, but we're filing the lock bar today I'm going to do 1 centimeter measurements. Pull that pin back out. Then we're going to remove our lock bar. Remember, you still got that lock bar spring in there. You'll lose it if you don't keep an eye on it. And now we're going to a small wheel attachment. Again, this part, the filing, is purely aesthetic. So it's what you want. Now you could stick with just this pattern right here, which is cute. That's not bad. Nice simple pattern, nice wave. We're going to take it a little bit further. Make it a little closer to vine work. So I try to be symmetrical. So we'll go there, there. So I just spring it in the last little bit by hand. Now we're already ready to permanently reassemble this knife. So we're going to put that pin back in. Function check. Perfect. File work check. Lovely. Some lovely vine work. What do you think? Operation is just great. Next step is to get this pin cut to length. Now this next step is one of the most important parts of the process, and it will determine whether your finished knife actually functions or not. So what we need to do is okay, it's a whole new day, and that epoxy is dried up beautifully. Looks like we got everything lined up. Since there are no pins and everything, and epoxy is so slippery, slimy, those scales want to skew out of the way. So before that flash point where everything sticks, you've got to keep an eye on it, make sure, or you could wake up the next morning to your scales gone way out of place. So let's get to work and let's finish up this beautiful buck. I have a little gander here before we start grinding, just so you see what it looks like. I always install proud and then come down to the scales. Okay, time to see this project come alive. And now a little bit of handwork, a little bit of hand sanding just to refine it before we take it to the buffer and we really see it come to life. Okay, here we are up to 2000 grit. Let me know what you think of this versus a polished finish. I personally love this finish on brass. Like a satin, just a very mild textured finish, but look at that wood. Oh my goodness. So beautiful. But we're gonna take this to the buffer now and buff this into the finish we want. Now brass is really dirty when you're buffing it. It's like aluminum. It lets off a lot of material. You can really hog off a lot of material. So you don't want to be scrubbing. This is like my dirty wheel. I have a clean one over here. So I'll do the bulk of my brass work here on this one. And then I'll switch to the cleaner wheel. I'll try to keep them separate as much as possible so I don't pack this beautiful burl full of waxy compound. You just watch this. You see this finish? Just watch this. There we go. So what do you think? That satin finish or that polished finish? Of course, then we have our file work there. Beautiful. What a new lease on life this buck has. You can do this with any buck 110, buck 112, right from a brand new one, pulled right off the shelf, to one. I've done them as old as 50, 60 years old. Now I've got to sharpen that edge and clean up the blade a little bit, but that's all stuff you've seen before. So that's it for this video. Make sure you hit that like button, please. I would appreciate it. Share. That's the greatest way, of course. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, post it on your social media if you have a page. And that just helps the video spread out there and grow, of course. Just multiplies each time. Really appreciate it. Again, leave me a comment, subscribe if it's your first time here. I hope to see you in the next video. Look at that. Look at the figuring in that burl. Oh! That is wild. Thanks for watching. Now, if you were watching earlier in this video and I mentioned the critical step to this part of the process, you might have got all mad, some people, and clicked off and went on. Probably get a bunch of nasty comments how I wouldn't reveal it. But you guys who stayed right to the end, I'll show you. Come over here and let's have a close look. Okay, so here's what's happening. These pinholes, if you forget about these and you epoxy this up and glue your handle in there, all of that will squeeze out around the lock bar and the lock bar spring of your knife, and your knife won't function, as simple as that. If you clamp that lock bar in, it will create a backing surface for this hole. These two out here, this one up here, are wide open in the body. You can get a backing inside there to stop squeeze out there, but this one you can't. But what I like to do in either case is take a little bit of cyanoacrylate. So this is a thick one. This is gap filler. You can put a little dab on there. A little bit of activator to seize it in place before it bleeds through. We'll sand it off flush and you'll have a permanent filler for those holes that won't be out on the inside. So that gap filler there is really thick, so that'll just start to bleed down in there. If you haven't used cyanoacrylate and activator, man, for a maker's shop, you just gotta have it. We'll just put a little dab over each hole there. And here's the result. I've ground it down now beneath flush. And those holes have little plugs in them that don't bleed through the inside. So they don't actually affect function of the knife.